Lawmakers in Brussels today agreed on far-reaching reforms to the European Union's immigration and asylum policies. The European Parliament approved what is being billed as a fairer system of settling new immigrants across all 27 member states of the EU. The changes will bring in tougher border checks and force all EU members to share responsibility for immigration. The agreement follows nearly a decade of political wrangling. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has welcomed the reforms, calling them historic and indispensable. But Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk today said that his government will not accept what is known as the relocation mechanism.
Migrants arriving on the Italian island of Lampedusa, one of the front lines in Europe's struggle to control migration. Last year, more than 1.1 million people filed asylum claims in the EU, the highest number since 2016. Italy has been one of the countries pressing for an overhaul of immigration policies to help share the burden. The EU Migration and Asylum Pact bundles agreements that were years in the making. A chief aim is to synchronize procedures, starting with the screening of non-EU nationals on arrival and the collection of biometric data. Border facilities will be created to accommodate asylum seekers, with faster decisions to speed up the return of those ineligible. Most importantly, all EU members will be required to either take in asylum seekers or help with financial contributions. The pact also contains a controversial provision for sending migrants to safe third countries. Italy is leading the way after striking a deal with Albania, which is in the process of building 2 housing facilities to receive migrants from Italy. Rights activists say the EU asylum reforms will lower protections, while far-right parties say they don't go far enough. One centrist lawmaker from France called the pact a balanced improvement of the system that's currently in place.
DW correspondent Jack Parrock, he was at the European Parliament today when lawmakers approved the immigration reforms.
This has been one of the most grueling, complex, difficult, divisive pieces of legislation in the European Union, especially for the last decade. And a lot of the MEPs here in Brussels, in the European Union, have been very, very conflicted about trying to get this over the line. Many of them voted against certain aspects of the pact, but have approved other aspects. And overall, all of the different elements of this package got enough votes, were approved, meaning the overarching thing is approved. And that will be a relief for many of the people that have been heavily involved in the negotiations on this Migration and Asylum Pact, because they were all interdependent. If one aspect were to have failed, the whole thing wouldn't have worked. That's because things like the detention and processing at the EU's external borders in countries like Italy, Greece and Spain was reliant on another part of the vote, which was to transfer people up into other parts of the European Union. It's all approved. There will be a sigh of relief, but as one MEP said to me ahead of the vote, no one will be popping bottles of champagne in Brussels this evening.
That was Jack Parrock reporting. Jack also spoke to the European Union's top migration official, the Home Affairs Commissioner, Ylva Johansson.
Commissioner Johansson, thank you so much for joining us after this very important vote here in the European Parliament. What's your reaction to the Migration and Asylum Pact passing?
I'm extremely proud. This is a historical decision, it's a historical moment. When I took office 4.5 years ago, very few thought that we could make it to actually have both Parliament and the Member States to agree on a new, comprehensive and solid migration and asylum policy.
What do you think that this is going to mean? It's going to be 2 years before this pact actually gets into effect, though. Do you think that it will change the philosophy of the member states to support the countries in the south that are dealing with the highest numbers?
Yes, and the feeling I have from the member states is they're eager to implement this. So we will meet in a few weeks, all with the member states. I will come up with an implementation plan, and they are ready to start already now with the implementation. So even if there is a deadline when everything has to be implemented, it's 2 years from now, but they are ready to start right now with the implementation. And that will be the total focus from my side, of course, to make sure that this is not only a paper tiger, there's a law, and it has to be implemented on the ground.
Many of the political factions, many of the MEPs here today were opposed to many different aspects of it. Not everyone is on board. How are you going to try and unify sort of the politicians and the governments of the EU to get behind it?
We have a majority, and I think this is unprecedented that we have been able to agree both in Parliament and in Council with the Member States. And of course, this is a compromise, and I'm very proud to see also how the MEPs had the courage to do the necessary compromises. Everybody understands it's not going to be possible to agree on a common migration and asylum policy without compromises.
Thank you so much for joining us on DW.
All right, I'm going to cross over now to Camille in Paris. She's an expert on migration and associate director at the Migration Policy Institute Europe. Camille, it's good to have you with us. First, just let me get your reaction to this reform.
Yes, that was long in the making. This is really, I will say, the culmination of years of negotiation at EU level on one of the most sensitive, politicized topic. And on the one hand, this is a political signal that European policymakers are ready to compromise, are ready to find a deal on how to move forward together on these migration issues. And in that sense, this is also a major political win for this European Commission. But at the same time, the deal as it stands is an agreement that's going to be, much tougher on asylum seekers. That's also failing to answer many of the issues that Europe is facing at the moment. Labor migration, how to create safe pathways for refugees, and to answer to condition in a number of countries of origin, of countries of transit. And now, while it raises, a lot of challenges in terms of implementation, what is this pact going to concretely lead to on the ground in the next few years?
Well, let me ask you about that, Camille, because we've already heard, the day that this was passed, we're hearing from Poland that it will not abide by all of the requirements of this agreement, namely, with the relocation of newly arrived migrants. It sounds like this plan could almost be dead on arrival.
Yes, so this, one of the main pride for the European Commission and for the Council was to say we've agreed on this mandatory solidarity that indeed can be relocation of asylum seekers or financial contribution. And we're seeing how this is such a fragile agreement, given that countries like Poland, but others have also already stated that they were not interested in relocation. And so I think this very tiny political, equilibrium and balance will need to be maintained. And I think that's really going to be a cornerstone on making the pact tangible and a reality. The key question is really, can this project, this complex system that's supposed to be implemented in the next 2 years, actually lead to change in the way migration flows are currently managed, and that we moved away from a series of unilateral measures from different member states to a more European approach. And for Donald Tusk to say that today, I think it's signal that they're adopt to believe it will be the case.
I'm wondering, though, Camille, considering how many years we've been reporting on the European Union trying time and time again to get some type of common migration policy, that were all of the member states today so desperate to get some type of agreement that they agreed to this, knowing that it's more window dressing, knowing that there are member states that will not go along on the ground?
Yeah, it's a political deal, and it's been a deal between member states, but also between members of European Parliament. And so that's why, in terms of signal, it shows a success, I believe, for the European Commission and for, in a way, the EU approach. But it also, I think, so much remains to be seen in terms of how exactly this is going to be rolled out, and what are going to be commitment from different member states. And when it comes to relocation, we've seen in the past that there were a few member states who, would engage voluntarily in relocation. And so that's going to be a critical part of the pact to be implemented in the next years, to see how this clause that is so essential will actually play out.
Yeah, there's a lot of work still to be done. Camille, Associate Director at the Migration Policy Institute Europe. Camille, we appreciate your time and your analysis tonight. Thank you.